All right, now on Zero Blog 30, we are privileged to have, I believe our PR people asked us at the beginning of the year to name our top 10 folks that we would like to have on their show. And the gentleman that we have today was on that list. So I am absolutely thrilled. We have Navy Captain Scott Kelly, but you might know him from all the pictures that he used to post of selfies of himself while he was in space. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today.
You are welcome, and you do not have to humor me with those lies about the top 10.
No, it's not a lie.
We can show you the list.
God's honest
truth. Pull it up.
Yeah, okay.
We've wanted to have an astronaut for a little while. I want to set the tone of the interview. Allow me to set the tone. I have a question that has been burning in my mind about astronauts for decades. Before you go to space, do you do bathroom training on Earth? Because I can't imagine the first time that you do it, it's in space.
Absolutely. You know, I figured, though, that it would take at least one question before we got to the bathroom question. Usually that's reserved for, I would say, kindergartners through the second grade. They go right for the bathroom.
I told you I've had it for decades and nobody's ever answered.
Yeah. Well, you know, when everything floats, toilet training in before you get to space is very important. We actually had a toilet, the space shuttle toilet that we trained on actually had a camera inside the toilet because the positioning is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So, and there was a video monitor in front of you, so you would practice getting the feel for being right over the intended target, which was the waste tube on the toilet. So you saw a part of your anatomy that you've probably never seen before.
From that angle. That's interesting.
And then is it like a vacuum and just like sucks it up, or how does it work?
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, we'll leave it at that. So
Okay.
you mentioned kindergarten, second grade. You know, so many kids, they say at that age, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so often a lot of them say astronauts, and then obviously not many of them grow up to be astronauts. When did you know you wanted to be an astronaut?
So, you know, I was like a lot of kids, you know, that grew up during the Apollo era a little bit. And, you know, I was born in 1964, saw the moon landing. Remember that, one of my first memories, 1969. So it was something that was exciting to me, interested me. But I was a really bad student growing up, and I couldn't pay attention, didn't do well in school. And it wasn't until I got to college, still struggling, and found the book, The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe, inspired me. Made me think that possibly if I could just do better in school, maybe I could fly, you know, airplanes in the Navy. If not the Navy, maybe the Air Force.
Yep.
The Navy wouldn't have me.
So then you had a very decorated career in the Navy initially. And then what's the process to go from being a pilot to, all right, now I'm going to go over and work for NASA?
So, you know, I am a retired Navy captain. It's interesting that, you know, most of my time in the military was spent in Houston working for NASA. So my Navy experience was up to an 03. I was a lieutenant when I went to NASA. But the process is, you know, for a pilot or a test pilot, shuttle pilot, you become a test pilot. So, you know, after my first tour of duty in my fighter squadron, which was the world-famous Pukin Dogs,
okay.
the F-143, flying the F-14 Tomcat, I went to test pilot school. Worked as a test pilot for a couple of years, kind of applied to the space program, not really seriously because I didn't have a master's degree. I didn't think I was qualified yet. I thought maybe 10 years from that point, maybe I would be. But, you know, took the chance and was lucky enough to get an interview and then got selected.
So what are they looking for at NASA? If like some of our listeners, we have a lot of pilots who listen to the show. What are they looking for at NASA? Is it a certain personality type, a disposition?
Well, you know, certainly you need someone that can do the job first, right? Someone who's technically competent, be able to work in a stressful operational environment. But because you live in very close quarters, they also want people that get along with, you know, their
plays well with others.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're, you know, especially on a long duration flight, if you get tired of your crewmates, there's no way getting away from them. You can't just go home at the end of the day. So they look for that. Also, though, especially in the space station era, where, you know, you can't call the repairman, you can't called a doctor. I mean, not only do you need a competent person in their field before they went to NASA, but you need someone that's kind of capable of doing a lot of different things, because on the space station, you're the scientist, the engineer, the IT person, the plumber, the electrician, doctor, the dentist, everything.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about being up there in the space station, obviously so far from Earth. Was there ever a time where you thought to yourself, uh-oh, this isn't right, or you were scared that something was going wrong?
Yes, a number of times.
You want to talk about any of those times?
I wouldn't say I was scared, though. But
no?
Not in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a heightened sense of awareness and concern. Let me think. On my first flight, we were on entry. We had some failures with the navigation system, and kind of somewhat complicated. The air data system wasn't performing right, and you had to, be very careful in the procedures that you're doing to get home safely, to be able to land. My second flight, when I was the commander of the space shuttle, we had a very publicly reported on hole in the bottom of the space shuttle, and that was several years after Columbia. They were talking about us having to go do a repair potentially, but we decided against it and came home with a hole in the bottom that went down to the aluminum structure that was about this big.
That had to make.
I imagine that's not ideal.
Yeah,
not ideal.
They did the analysis of it and decided it was probably less risky to come home as is than try to fix it and maybe make it worse. My long duration.
Can you walk?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through like your first day in NASA? Because I imagine just watching all these space shows, space movies, and things like that, walking into NASA your first day must be incredibly intimidating, because you just know smart people are in every single room. Was there a moment where you walked in and you're like, fuck, I don't know if I belong here?
I wouldn't say I felt intimidated. I think I definitely felt a little bit in awe, considering the fact that, you're aware of what NASA's accomplished, who the people are that worked in the space program, and then understanding that you're just starting your career as a part of that. And, maybe, I guess, a little bit of an intimidation where the expectations are pretty high. I mean, they're investing a lot in you, but I think in hindsight, maybe I felt a little bit of that, but it was more, just feeling happy to be there, and that this opportunity is really a privilege that so few people get to have.
Right. I mean, you talk about that sense of awe. When you think about the percentage right now of people who are serving in the military, who have served in the military, it's less than 1% of our population, and then you think about how many astronauts have come through NASA and what a minuscule number that is. How do you make sense of that in your head, that you're part of such an elite fraternity?
I just think of myself as like a below average guy doing a slightly above average job, and I'm just happy to be there. So,
well, that's the same for me. You and I, we're the same, sir. Yeah. That's pretty nice. Did it take a little bit of the thunder away that your brother got in on the same class, though, where you're like, maybe I'm not that special if he's doing it too?
No, I thought it was great. It's. I think anyone having this opportunity, it's kind of a blessing, a privilege, and to be able to share that experience with someone I've known my whole life, my twin brother, makes it even more special, because we, grew up together, and now we have something that we can, for the rest of our lives share and talk about. Although we don't talk about it much, but occasionally we'll say, hey, remember that kind of thing in space?
That's pretty awesome. And then, I mean, even NASA took advantage of it and did a study on you and your brother.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was a lot of medical tests. I've probably done more MRIs than any person alive, possibly. I don't know. But a lot of samples done in space that, drawn our own blood, urine, other things that I probably could mention here, but I won't.
And what was the biggest difference between you spending that time in space and your twin brother spending the time on Earth?
I think the biggest difference when I got back is they determined that I am not only smarter, but now more handsome than my brother Mark. Which kind of brings up a point that I wanted to talk about.
What's that?
You know, when I got back from space, I saw this article from Barstool Sports. I have it right here, and it says, can I read it?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
It says, astronaut Scott Kelly's girlfriend is preposterously hot.
As she sits right here in the room with us.
No, it gets better.
Who is the author? Do you have the author?
Who's the author?
Let me see here. Feidelberg.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. All right. Go ahead.
Says, that's astronaut Scott Kelly. Scott just got back from a year in space. Grew 2 inches while he was up there. No big deal. Anyway, all that shit is boring. Who really cares about space, right? It's big, and it's got stars. I get it. What really fascinated me about this whole thing is that upon landing, Scott reunited with his loved ones, and that's when we were introduced to his girlfriend, Amiko Cowderer at the time, now my wife, Kelly.
Yes.
Lady in red. Where the hell did this chick come from? How did Scott, a man who looks like a peeled potato, covered in milk, being prepared to be mashed, land her? The guy is certainly no astronaut Mike Dexter, whoever the hell Mike Dexter is. Is there some aspect of being extraordinarily smart, at the top of your field and covered in the national media that women find attractive? He wasn't aware that we had been together for like 6 or 7 years at that time.
Probably not.
I'm sure Scott Kelly has some incredible accomplishments. In case you've forgotten by now, he just got back from space. But this is hands down the most impressive one. This Amiko gal is gorgeous. 10 billion light years more attractive than Scott. And here's one of the main things I take exception to, right? Because I personally think she's about 100 billion light years more attractive than me. Mm-hmm. And certainly Moose Man over there.
Oh, come on. I'm just minding my own business. I didn't write this.
Yeah, but you're guilty by association. Okay,
fair.
I'm almost done. It must be impossible not to be an astronaut and not be braggy. If I went to space, I'd bring it up literally every single second. Did I catch the Oscars? No. Sorry. I was in space. How do you get to the highway from here? Okay. You're going to want to get into a space shuttle, then exit the Earth's atmosphere about 17,000 miles per hour. Wait, no. Those are directions to space. I've been there. But it's got to be harder to not brag about this gal. Seriously, NASA should look into this relationship. Name that sounds like a spy. Dating a dude way beneath her. Working social media at NASA. This is all classic spy stuff. I'm not saying this relationship is impossible. Not at all. But it is equally likely that she's working for the USSR and plans to return it to glory. P.S. Betty had so many sweet nudes saved on that computer up there. So, let me say a couple of things.
Please.
All right.
Some of this is actually true.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up is because I'm all for a good joke, and I think it's funny. Mm-hmm. I'm also not too into, like, objectifying women and things and making fun of people's appearances, but it is really funny. And the fact that I was able to come in here and confront you guys with it for the purpose of humor is, I feel pretty proud of myself.
Well, we appreciate your sense of humor.
Yeah.
Honestly,
that's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So.
Would your wife like to comment at all? Would you like to say anything?
I have no comments.
No comments. No comments. Okay.
That's fair.
Oh,
I don't know where we go from here.
I don't know. I'm not
honestly.
really sure either. Back in the.
Let's talk a little bit about our guy Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
Do you follow Buzz?
Yeah.
Do you follow Buzz on
Not everywhere.
social media?
A little bit. Yeah, I'm familiar with some of Buzz's posts. Yeah.
We really like the fact that he takes being a space guy to like the 10th degree, like where he wears basically all of his clothes has like the moon on it or space shuttles or spaceships. Do you envision yourself, because you're basically in all black today, when do you feel like is the appropriate time to become full out space guy?
Like Buzz?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Buzz.
Oh, maybe tomorrow. I don't know.
I would instantly.
No,
because we had the.
Yeah, Buzz is a national hero. He's a great guy. Walked on the moon. He can wear whatever the hell he wants, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
this is a military podcast, so we talk about military issues a lot, and a lot of those things come up in movies. Like we really love Saving Private Ryan. We love the Band of Brothers, but we constantly watch movies where we will critique the shit out of them from a military's perspective. Like with me, the movie Levy for dog handlers. I don't know of one for cons, but we've also talked about The Hurt Locker. Whenever you watch a movie like The Martian, do you Monday morning quarterback the shit out of it?
I don't, because I recognize that a lot of movies are, in some cases they're fictional, like The Martian. In some cases they're, based on a true story, so they have to, they have to add some drama, like, Miracle on the Hudson, for instance.
Sure.
Some of that did not happen, and there was conflict in there that really didn't exist. So they do that to make the story make sense, so people will go watch it. As an example, Gravity, right? The movie Gravity had, thousands of things that were technically wrong with it, and a lot of people at NASA had an issue with it. I personally didn't. I thought it was very entertaining, especially when you watch it on the space station, which we did.
Right.
It's kind of like, watching a movie of your house burning down while you're inside of it.
It's a little scary, but okay.
Yeah, that's got to be incredibly embarrassing for the directors, too, knowing that astronauts are in the space station. Like, this is not accurate at all.
Are there any movies that do a good job of depicting space?
I think Apollo 13 is probably one of the better ones. The Martian was pretty good, too. There's a few things that were a little odd about it, technically, like, calling the commander of the spacecraft commander all the time. I mean, we're kind of on a first name basis.
Right.
And but overall, I thought it was pretty good. But I would say Apollo 13 is probably the most technically accurate one.
And speaking of the Martian, where do you think NASA goes from here in the future? What is next for NASA and our astronaut corps?
Right now the plan is to go back to the moon to stay, and then use that as a a place to learn more, to go to Mars, or as a launching point in some respect. When that happens, we'll see. I think the current plan is 2024, and hopefully we can do that. We certainly could do it if we decided we were going to, and put the resources behind it. The question, is will we do that? Do you invest the amount of money it's going to take? And also the challenge NASA also runs into is every time we get a new president, a new Congress, we change the budget, we change the plan, and that doesn't help anybody.
Right.
Well, how far away realistically do you think we are from getting to Mars? Not like miles-wise, but technology.
Oh, technology, I think we could, we're pretty close. I mean, radiation, I would say, would be the biggest challenge, protecting the crew from radiation. I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge, but I think, most other things we can probably build and figure out right now. Going to Mars is not a question of rocket science. It's a question of political science, which I just stole that line from my brother, so I got to give him credit. But that's what he
pretty
says.
Good one.
That is a good one. I just have some rapid fire questions, and then we can wrap things up. But if you'll just indulge me here for a second. Hardest thing to do in space that we take for granted here on Earth with all our gravity and whatnot.
Hardest thing to do in space. Well, let's go back to question number one.
I knew it.
All right.
Which is
on the right track.
Number one, and actually, which is really number two. Number one is not as.
Number two's got to be difficult. I mean, I imagine they just before you start training, they just send you out and be like, "Go eat a bunch of cheesy gordita crunches from Taco Bell. We got a long day of training ahead of us."
Well, what's your speaking of gravity and the lack of gravity? What's your favorite thing to do when there isn't any gravity?
You look out at the Earth, and the floating's
Pretty
fun
big
and
flex,
everything.
yeah.
Floating's fun and it's fun, but it makes most things more difficult to do.
Yep.
Not just the bathroom, but mostly everything except for moving around objects because they don't have weight. Still have mass. You got to be careful, and putting yourself into unusual attitudes, positions. Like if you're trying to hook up the cable to the VCR or something on the back of the TV, that becomes a lot easier in space. Everything else is harder, but the fun thing is mostly just being there and working on something. It's kind of like being in the military. The best part I always found is the camaraderie and the team spirit and working on something that you feel strongly about and doing it together with a great group of people.
Are you still friends with a lot of the crew?
Yeah, absolutely. I've flown in space with 40 different people.
Wow.
Don't keep in touch with all of them on a regular basis, but I do with a lot of them. And, not only the NASA astronauts, but also, folks from other countries that I've flown with, Canada, a bunch of European guys, Russians, Japanese.
Who's your favorite astronaut of all time that isn't you or your brother?
John Young.
Why John Young?
He was kind of the conscience of NASA for decades. He flew 2 Gemini flights. He flew 2 Apollo flights. He wouldn't say he walked on the moon. What John would say he worked on the moon, is what he did on Apollo 16. He was the first commander of the Space Shuttle Columbia, which with him and Bob Crippen, who was the pilot, they were the only 2 people in the history of spaceflight or the history of our species that had flown into space on a rocket that had not been previously flown without people in it.
Wow.
So, some people would argue that was probably the most risky space flight of all time.
Wow.
Because the shuttle's the most complicated aerospace vehicle ever built. And then he was at NASA the rest of his career, and he was always, very conscious of the risk involved and always doing the right thing regardless of any politics or cost. He was really all about protecting his colleagues, the current astronauts that he was working with.
All right, and last one. What's it like being trapped in the space station with another cosmonaut for that long of a duration?
So it's great. The cosmonauts, some of them are my closest friends. People have a different impression. I think your initial impression of Russians before you get to know them is that they're kind of grumpy and hard to get to know. But once you get through that hard outer shell, you can become friends with them at a very deeper level quicker than I think with other cultures. So, even though at times our countries would have, issues politically, whether it was during the Cold War or even today, sometimes we're friends, sometimes we're not. That never affected our relationship in space because it was always about, we're in this together, we're a team, we're here to support each other, good days, bad days, we're here to protect each other, even literally our own lives. So they were always great. Love flying in space with Russians and all my other crewmates as well.
Sure.
And final question for you, sir. We talk a lot about military transition because the transition out of the military is a difficult one for a lot of people. I imagine leaving NASA, you had a lot of questions about what was next for you. How did you deal with the transition out from such a prestigious job?
That's a very good question. So when I left NASA, I left in a position that was probably, one of the best situations that people could leave that job. And I had a lot of opportunity. And still, it was very, very challenging and difficult because you go from working on something that you've dedicated, for me, 20 years of my life to something technically complicated, challenging, and working with a great team to now, my team is much smaller. The stuff I do is still rewarding, but it's not the same kind of rewarding. If I make a mistake in my job, someone might not be happy, but I'm not going to die, right?
Right.
Not that I'm looking to die or anything, but that kind of
consequence.
It makes the experience more risk, more reward in some cases, I think, is how a lot of people that are in the military or in this kind of job look at things. So in my case, it was still very, very difficult. And I kind of feel for some of my colleagues or definitely people in the military that come out of this situation and, they're doing something incredible, something meaningful for their country. And then all of a sudden, they're back in their hometown with potentially limited opportunity. So I absolutely get it.
Oh, great. Good answer.
Very good answer. Very good
All right,
answer.
sir. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you don't do a lot of podcast appearances. I have a feeling that you did it just so you could roast our colleague Feidelberg after that blog that he wrote. Thanks for not taking that out on us, and good luck to you in all your future endeavors. Where can people find your books at?
Where they find books.
They're everywhere.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect answer. Simple answer from a complicated man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.